Welcome to my spoiler-free review of the 2021 one-season show, M.O.D.O.K. I will not be spoiling any of the show. I'm gonna try to keep spoilers for other Marvel stuff vague enough. I have done videos talking about the individual episodes, and the link to the playlist is in the description box. The show is rated TVMA, so will this video be. And I really fucking love the show. I'm gonna miss it. I only recently watched it. Yeah. And I think it is probably a good place to start that. So this has some connection to Robot Chicken. Now, I cannot evaluate the entirety of Robot Chicken. I have seen, I guess, probably about 2 hours worth of it, but that was very carefully curated by someone who knows my sense of humor extremely well. So I'm not making any excuses for that show. On the whole, I do love what I've seen, and if you haven't already, I recommend watching Grappling Ignorances. I forget if they made more than one video, but they made at least one video talking about problematic aspects of Robot Chicken. But there is obviously some, yeah, this was made by some of the same people and has the same kind of, you know, this thing of taking, action figures and doing stop motion animation and such, and the sense of humor is very, very similar. I knew that it would be funny, and it is, but I was a tiny bit worried if they would be able to tell a story that wasn't very reverential and referential towards other comic book media, as the Robot Chicken superhero stuff tends to be, and if they could tell a story, period, like an actual ongoing, a lot of the Robot Chicken, it's just, a few minutes, sometimes it's a few seconds, and then they move on to something else. And even if they feature the same characters multiple times, it's not necessarily going to be in continuity with each other. And yeah, I personally think they did a really solid job here. Most of the criticisms I've seen that make sense come from people who have more experience with watching adult animation than myself. I mean, for me, it's this, Simpsons, South Park, Futurama, some American Dad, right, and also not all of Futurama. Let's see, Simpsons, I definitely stopped after, I mean, the first 7 seasons are what I remember. I think I watched at least a few more seasons. I've seen some say that this, is nowhere near as good as something like Rick and Morty. And I have heard a lot of good about that. Obviously, there are some issues, some people who were canceled who have a lot of influence over that show. I'm not making any excuses for them. At this point, I probably won't watch Rick and Morty ever, considering that. But I can absolutely imagine that does a better job than this. I was personally really impressed by this, and that might be in part because I haven't watched as much adult animated, especially of like really recent stuff. And honestly, this one, if it hadn't been Marvel, I probably wouldn't have watched this one either. So basically, the setup here is that this is your kind of straightforward-ish sitcom, but with M.O.D.O.K and with like other comic book, it's centered on M.O.D.O.K, but other comic book characters and like settings and items and such will make appearances. I guess this is a good place to say that the context of M.O.D.O.K is important to take into consideration here, because when he was first conceived, like, at least some people thought he was cool. You know, there were several things going on with this character that back then were thought of as cool. You know, he's got a giant head. He has this sort of hover chair. You know, he has like all these weapons in the hover chair. You know, but in more recent decades, he's difficult to take seriously. This is not the only piece of somewhat recent comic book media that absolutely does not even try to, or at least a lot of the time doesn't. And I think this is my favorite version that isn't a comic book of his. Unfortunately, I cannot say where else I have seen him pop up without spoiling, because, yeah. But basically, yeah, they're like, well, he's a joke character, so let's make the show a comedy, you know? And I fucking love that they didn't just make it like, okay, so, you know, supervillain who wants to conquer the world, do it as a comedy. I don't know. I mean, I guess we could just do a thing where he's constantly trying to take over the world and there's funny stuff. And that is some of what they do, for sure. But it's actually a workplace sitcom about, like, you know, he is in a kind of tough situation with his family, and he, like, they do that thing where part of the main conflict is if he's going to choose work or family. But work is world domination, you know, and because of that, his annoying coworker doesn't just, you know, use the, you know, microwave at work to reheat fish or finish the coffee and then not make another cup. No, they're like fucking mutating, you know, and you know, yeah, mutating living beings, making robots and shit, and just, yeah. And I really appreciated that they do actually go for these tender, sweet moments also, and like have actual drama. It's not all laughs. And I personally thought the balance worked well. Like, it is almost entirely jokes. You know, I'd say 80 to 90% of the show is making you laugh. But yeah, every so often there is something in there that will make you feel also. And so yeah, in some ways very like South Park, for example. And yeah, there's the psychological accuracy at times is actually quite impressive. Like, they really do understand the different characters really well. Like, it didn't feel like characters are kind of just mouthpieces for one of the writers, for example, or like, oh, here comes this character. I can tell someone writing for this just hates, you know, this entire, like, okay, there's maybe at least one character where it's just like, they fucking hate this kind of person in real life, but to me, it did not feel like it just derailed. And personally, I was very happy with what they did with the major characters. There are some characters that I'm sure some, you know, have found, okay, that character was not in it as much as I'd hoped. I personally thought they tended to choose to do that for ones that are not really the focus. Like, it is about M.O.D.O.K and his family and his immediate, like, the people who he spends a lot of time with and has various relationships with and such. And yeah, the show gets a lot right about like comic book media, both in just the kind of ridiculous shit that can happen, and because it's a comedy, it acknowledges how ridiculous a lot of this is, which, like, that's part of why I love comic book media, you know? The fact that there's ridiculous shit. Not all of it has to acknowledge it, but I do find it quite nice when that is sometimes the case. And also just, yeah, like, there's a bunch of things that are right out of, you'll have characters. Sometimes nobody even says what the character's name is or what their entire deal is, and I think that, yeah, it is a sitcom, workplace sitcom set within the Marvel universe, and it plays out in a way that one might expect from such. For better or for worse, personally, I thought it was for better. And yeah, it stays true to itself. It, invents this little weird corner for itself, and I never really felt like it just lost itself. The level of detail is quite good. There are episodes where there is a ridiculous amount of like comic book sci-fi, stuff going on. And the yeah, as if it is worth noting that technically you can get into this without knowing anything about comic books, but there definitely are characters that you're probably going to Google after they make an appearance. But yeah, like you really don't need any prior knowledge. They give you enough of a sense of the major characters so early. And yeah, the dialogue tends to be great both when it is funny and when it's heartfelt. And every character has their own distinct voice. Like you could read a line of dialogue without it being attributed to a character, just like read part of a script and you'd know, oh, that's this character. For a lot of it, perhaps not all. And yeah, I really appreciated how well it manages to keep focus. The like basically every episode has some conflict that the episode is about trying to resolve in one way or another, and they tend to be connected to the overall situation. And yeah, the cinematography is really great. There's some very effective angles, and I would say it's never really boring looking. There's always something, it's not the most visually arresting, but and the editing is quite good. I would argue there's not really anything here that should not at all be. Like all of it is exploring some, like I mean, in a way, M.O.D.O.K is kind of going through a midlife crisis. There's some, he's struggling with how many people hate his guts and not really accepting that it's because he's a fucking supervillain. And yeah, I love all 10 episodes. They're around 25 minutes each, so it is not a terribly long sit. And yeah, you could definitely watch, you could binge this in one sitting if you really wanted to, if the humor does not get to be too much for you. And yeah, the production value is quite good. Like it never feels cheap. It never feels like there are corners cut or the like. There are some very intricate scenes, and the set design, I guess I can't say locations, but let's go with it. Costumes, makeup. Yeah, I know. It's animation, so it's technically... Anyway, all of those are done well. Like you get a sense of who people are through it, and it is always distinct. Like you can immediately tell where you are and who someone is, even if you only get a quick glimpse. And the music is great, really capturing this kind of like, in M.O.D.O.K's mind, he is edgy, he is awesome. But at the same time, everybody else thinks he's completely absurd. So yeah, score captures that really well. The sound design is fantastic. I know I've said it before, but I do think it bears repeating. For animation, sound design is extremely important because it really helps sell it. Because like at the end of the day, it's never photorealistic. It's not meant to be. We know we're looking at like action figures and like clay being molded to the different situations they need, you know. But yeah, there's a real crunch to the sound design. And I I think that pretty much brings us to the acting. So I have been quite fond of Patton Oswalt for 20 plus years by now, and yeah, this is one of my favorite performances of his. It's very clear he's passionate about the character. You know, I do feel bad for him that he keeps almost being in like the MCU, and it always doesn't completely work out for various reasons, but he really throws himself into it. Like, it does not feel like he's holding back in the slightest. And I must admit, I don't know too much else of the main cast, but I did really love Ben Schwartz here playing Lou, M.O.D.O.K's son, who's also someone I've been really fond of for, I guess with him it's closer to 15 years. But since some of the stuff he made with College Humor, some of the stuff, I think everything that I've seen him appear in that's College Humor, I've really fucking loved him in. So yeah. And I guess that pretty much covers. I really love how they overcast the shit out of some fairly minor roles. Like, you can look up the cast list if you'd like and note how some are really not in that many episodes, and yet they got like, holy shit, that I would never have guessed someone of that stature would take such a tiny role in something so inherently fucking silly. But yeah, absolutely everyone does an amazing job. There's not a single performance here that is off. And the special effects are wonderfully charming. I am a real defender of claymation and stop motion in general. Like, we've gotta have more of that than we do today, because like there was a while where you would get a lot of it, and I can still go back and watch that and be like, holy shit. Like, I'm sorry, but the fucking stop motion in the Evil Dead trilogy, wow, you know. And today there's so little of it, and there's nothing quite like it. I'm not going to pretend like it frequently looks completely convincing, but I think it works when you're making something where we're not really supposed to think what we're seeing is real. And yeah, it does not really hold back on account of, like, you might think, oh well, if you gotta do this with like clay, or shit, I guess by now they maybe use computers to, my wrist is too fucking sore right now to look this shit up, but yeah, I can imagine they use computers to help at least some with it's not quite the way that they used to. It's not as time consuming and difficult. But there are situations here where it's like, that's not something I would have ever expected to see with claymation. That must have taken forever. And like I just said, maybe with computers, less so. There are action scenes, but they are always funny, or at least meant to be. I thought they were always funny. And it does really use the comic book elements to very striking effect. Like, there are fights between people who have like access to ridiculous technology and such. The comedy is very varied. It actually kind of reminded me of the way that you never really know what kind of joke you're about to get. Just, you know, there's very little limitation on it. It can be R-rated, but it can also be like PG, and they do every single type of joke. It reminded me somewhat of Hot Fuzz. Yes, at some point I will do more videos on Edgar Wright. I kind of, let's see, I think Hot Fuzz was the last movie I watched that he made. I know. I am working on addressing that. At some point, I think I will probably do every movie he's made, do at least one video per. Right now I only have Hot Fuzz and Shaun of the Dead, and those are also the only ones I've watched. But yeah, I really do want to get into the others as well. But yeah, I mean, you've got like verbal comedy that sometimes feels right out of Blackadder, plays on words, puns, and such. You've got gross out comedy, the yeah, sight gags, running gags. You have characters not understanding something in a comedic way. You have things that come right out of the blue. You have things where it's like, okay, I know where this is going, and then you still laugh when it happens. Like, genuinely, throughout watching this, I was never 100% sure what exactly would happen next. And it is one of the funniest things I've watched in a while. And yeah, the stuff like horror, sci-fi, and fantasy is present and tends to really work. Like, it's not, the horror is not as big a part of it, though there is a lot of morbid humor. But when it's there, it does really, really work. And yeah, the sci-fi and fantasy, like, they go for a lot of really ridiculous concepts and types of, futuristic tech and magic and such. And yeah, so there is definitely an effort to make it as TVMA as possible. So you do have, like, for example, there might be a gag that didn't need to be there, but it's there so that they can, fuck with the Puritans, basically. Like, there might be a sex scene that doesn't need to be there, but, it is undeniably funny to fuck with people who just can't handle the idea that, some people have sex. And yeah, same goes for violence, drugs, various things that, yeah. And I guess I've pretty much already said that the superpower use is creative. Did I already note? I personally think they do a good job of having the right amount as well. And I guess that pretty much... Yeah, so as far as politics goes, it is, there are jokes that are somewhat conservative, but there's definitely also stuff in there that is progressive, much like with, Robot Chicken. Like, every so often you will get a joke that is like, that was definitely left wing. That is not something a conservative would be saying. I remember one Robot Chicken bit that's like, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles get access to, like, some of those militarized vehicles that, law enforcement now have in America, and they point out this, the joke is how fucked up that is. you know it's not at all bootlicky, like a disturbingly high number of Republicans to this day still are for ICE. But the yeah, and it is very current. There are a number of jokes that are very much like stuff that is happening right now. Among other things, you have like tech CEO, tech billionaire kind of stuff, and what's that called again? Like corporate politics kind of stuff. Jokes about. I guess I don't want to give it away. I think you can probably. I think I've said as much as I want to about that now. So I think that does pretty much bring us to the yeah. I rate this Oh, actually, shit. Sorry. First, we do the rankings. So I think I'm probably gonna somewhat speed run this because it is a little it's long. But basically, the yeah. So I guess the yeah. Okay, so yes, ranking the MCU and adjacent pre-Disney shit. Yeah, that's the thing. No, yeah. Before Disney Plus started having shows that are explicitly set within the MCU. Those are the shows that I have ranked here. I have a different ranking for the ones, including the ones that are maybe not canon, but have some direct connection to the MCU. So that, and yeah, we're gonna move on because this is already too confusing. Anyway, so if we are talking, and we are, about the overall season as well as the season finale, worst to best, and really Inhumans is the only one that I can't find anything to love about, but yeah, here we go. Inhumans, Iron Fist Season 1, Runaways Season 1, Daredevil Season 2, The Defenders, M.O.D.O.K, Agent Carter Season 1 and 2, in that order, Cloak and Dagger Seasons 1 and 2, in that order, The Punisher Seasons 1 and 2, you get it by now, Hellstrom, Iron Fist Season 2, The Gift Season 1 and 2, Legion Seasons 1 through 3, Daredevil Season 3, Luke Cage Season 2, Luke Cage Season 1, Daredevil Season 1, Jessica Jones Season 3, Jessica Jones Season 2, Jessica Jones Season 1, and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 1 through 7. And if we're talking about the season opener, once again, worst to best, Inhumans, Iron Fist Season 1, Runaways Season 1, Daredevil Season 2, M.O.D.O.K, The Defenders, Hellstrom, Agent Carter Season 1 through 2, Cloak and Dagger, The Punisher, Iron Fist Season 2, The Gifted, Legion, Daredevil Season 3, Luke Cage Season 2, then 1, Daredevil Season 1, Jessica Jones Seasons 3, 2, and 1, and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Seasons 1 through 7. And yeah, I rate this 8 hilarious, brutal, ruthless takedowns of literally big-headed dictators or wannabe dictators out of 10. And no, I don't think it's random how similar M.O.D.O.K, at least on this show, is to Donald Trump.